Hi, everybody. I'm Corey Gill-Schuster. I am the director of the International MA in Conflict Resolution and Mediation. For those of you interested in the program itself, of attending the program, and if you have any administrative questions or how to apply or anything about the program itself, I am going to put my email in the chat. But for now, I would like to introduce the head of the program, Dr. Nimrod Rosler. Nimrod received, wait, he just moved. I just want to make sure he's still on. Nope, he's still on. Nimrod received his PhD from Hebrew University, the Swiss Center for Conflict Research, Management, and Resolution. He has taught in Israel and the US. He is the academic head of the program and the co-head of the Tel Aviv University Peace Index, which he will be referencing today. So go ahead. I will write my email address in the chat. Hi, Nimrod.
Hello, Corey, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Corey said, I'm going to speak to you today both about the research I'm conducting. My research focuses mostly on psychological and social aspects of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I will be discussing both some of my studies in the field, as well as some recent attitude polls that we have been conducting, both in Israel and in the Palestinian territories. And let me start by saying a few words about the two surveys I will be relating to. Okay? So the first survey, as Corey said, that I'm heading in the last couple of years together with my colleague, Dr. Alon Yakhtar, from the School of Political Science here at Tel Aviv University, is called the Peace Index. The Peace Index has been a regular poll of Israeli public opinion that has been run since 1994, meaning since the Oslo Accords, has been running on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, actually. And in the last couple of years, we have been continuing this project, although not every month, but about 3 to 4 times a year. The goal and the idea behind that is to follow Israeli public opinion with regards to issues of peace and conflict. And we have several questions that I will later present as part of my studies that we have been repeating since almost 1994, meaning we can look at longitudinal trends in Israeli public opinion regarding conflict and peace. The second data set that I will be using and presenting today is called the Palestinian-Israeli Pulse. Palestinian-Israeli Pulse is a joint survey run by my colleague, Dr. Khalil Shkaki from Ramallah, together with Dr. Dalia Shendlin, Alon Yakhtar, and myself. We've been running this poll. They have been running this poll for several years. I've joined this project since 2020, and we have run 2 studies, 2 polls. These polls had been conducted simultaneously both in Israel and in the Palestinian territories, meaning in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, in both cases among a representative sample of all of these populations. So the data that I will be presenting to you are representative and being run by polls and people who are running such things for many years. Let me share screen. Oh, I need you to enable me to share screen.
Just did.
So much, especially abroad, when speaking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and especially about the possibilities to resolve the conflict, the one option which is usually put on the table is the two-state solution, meaning the creation of a Palestinian state next to Israel and the 2 states living together as neighbors. This, I think, occupies world public opinion as the major potential resolution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for years. I would like to start by showing you the trends in both Israeli and Palestinian public opinion regarding the two-state solution. Does these does that prominent solution get support from these populations? And as you will be able to see, the two-state paradigms had been falling from its prominence among both Jews and Palestinians. And you'll be able to see here that support rates for a two-state solution has been dropping. Please focus on the blue and orange lines. Later, I'll talk about the red line, which is always very high. The blue and orange lines, which almost run in parallel, are blue is the attitudes of Israeli Jews in Israel, and orange are the attitudes of Palestinians in the Palestinian territories, meaning West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem. And as you can see here, those two populations have very similar support rates for a two-state solution. While in around 2016 and earlier, support rates for the two-state solution has been running around half of the population. We're supporting a two-state solution. In our latest joint poll conducted in the end of 2022, you can see that only a third of Jewish Israelis and Palestinians have been supporting a two-state solution. If you look on your right, you'll be able to see whether people believe that this solution is feasible, whether it will be possible to implement such a solution, if it's a viable solution. And once again, you can see here that that has been also falling to around third and even less if you look at Palestinian public opinion in the end of 2022. What's the red line? How come that's much higher than the rest? The red line refers to Israeli Arabs. Israeli Arabs is a unique population. It's a group, it's a minority within Israel, a minority that consists of mostly Muslim Arabs, but also Christian Arabs and Druze. Many of them regard themselves as Palestinians, meaning they are Palestinian citizens of Israel. And this is to differentiate between them and Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza who are not citizens of Israel. Okay? Now, how come their support rates are so much higher? If you just, it's a big discussion and we can talk a lot about that, but to make it very simple, if you just think about their identity as Palestinian citizens of Israel, it means they have some kind of duality within their identity. They are both Palestinians and Israelis. Now, a two-state solution, which will provide both nations with their national aspiration, meaning Jews with their aspiration in Israel as their country, and Palestinians fulfilling their national aspiration in Palestine, will be, of course, a wonderful solution for their inherent conflict in their identity. They'll be able to stay in Israel as citizens and feel that their national group, Palestinians, also have their own place. And that's the simple explanation to the high support rates of Arab Israelis. I'll call them from now Arab Israelis in order to not to make confusion between Arab Israelis and Palestinians. When I will refer to Palestinians, I will refer to Palestinians who live in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. Some more updated data, if you'd like to see that. So polls which have been conducted by my colleague Shkaki among Palestinians show that support rates after October 7th attack and the Israel-Gaza war have stayed quite similar, 34%. And quite surprisingly, in his latest poll from March 2024, just 2 months ago, support rates have increased to 45% among Palestinians. However, among Jewish Israelis, support rates for a two-state solution has dropped even further, down to 26% after October 7th, and have stayed the same even in our latest poll that we've conducted just last week. As you can see here, among Israeli Arabs, support rates are still very high. Why is that so? Why the two-state solution is perceived and not anymore as viable, support rates are low? How come, if you'd like to put it in more general terms, how come the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues for so long and takes such a high toll for from both of these societies. So in order to understand that, we need to look at the characteristics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been defined by many scholars in the field as an intractable conflict. An intractable conflict is characterized by, first of all, the goals of the people who are taking part in this conflict. Their goals are perceived as basic, as highly important for the existence of their group. So it can touch on national aspirations, it can touch on natural resources such as land, water, airspace, and it can talk about, for example, ideology, which could be perceived as of existential importance for the group. If you look at once again at our joint poll, you'll be able to see that when we ask Palestinians what's their most vital national goal, in the latest poll, we see that Israeli withdrawal from 1967 withdrawal back to 67 borders, the pre-67 war borders, and the creation of a Palestinian state, as well as the right of return of Palestinian refugees to their homes, are perceived as existential for them. The second very important and tragic characteristic of intractable conflict is that they are extremely violent. Now, violence in intractable conflict can be either very much on the foreground, as what we can see in the last 7 months in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it can also be in the background. And for several years, violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been in the background. However, if we look at the data we have examined, and that's already taken into account 4 years ago. I'm not talking after October 7th attacks and Israel-Gaza war, but I'm talking about 2020. If you take a look at that, then you'll see that among Palestinians, about 60% have personally witnessed injuries or deaths related to the conflict. Okay, 40% never witnessed, so that means that 60% witnessed at least once. Among non-settler Jews, we're talking about 40%. I believe that these percents has become much higher since the latest bloody war between the two parties. Another interesting yet very sad characteristic of such conflicts is that they're perceived as a zero-sum game. And you can see here that 65% among Jewish Israelis and 71% among Palestinians think that nothing can be done in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's good for both sides. Whatever is good for one side is bad for the other side. And since these conflicts touch on basic existential goals, they involve violence, and they're perceived as zero-sum, that's the major reasons why they seem unsolvable for for many people in the groups who are involved in these conflicts. There is a strong belief that develops over time that these conflicts cannot be resolved. Is it truth? Is it true that such conflict can never be resolved? The answer is no. Intractable conflicts, some of them have been resolved, such as the conflict in Northern Ireland, or the conflict in South Africa, or the conflict in Colombia, or in Guatemala, and in other places around the world. But for the societies that are involved in the conflict, these conflicts seems unsolvable most of the time. They demand great investment from the parties that are involved, sacrificing human lives, as well as a lot of material resources. And not only that, it demands a lot of psychological investment. Societies that are involved for a very long period of time, we're talking at least about one generation, my generation, my parents' generation, my children, we were all born into this conflict. We do not know any other reality. So it includes also a major psychological willingness to invest in the conflict, willingness to sacrifice things and to mobilize all your resources, also your psychological resources, to try to survive, win the other side over the other side in the conflict. What are the consequences of these conflicts? What's the consequences of the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts for the societies that are involved in them? So the consequences are very hard. It means that those societies experience hardship and very deep pain. And if you look at Israeli media or media that presents, of course, the situation in Gaza, you can see, of course, the levels, unbelievable levels of pain and hardship that both societies experience. They experience very strong sense of insecurity. They don't know whether the future ahead can promise their future existence or not. But on top of that, people, human beings, when they are in a situation of stress, especially when they're in a situation of stress, they need a shared understanding of what's happening. Why is it happening? Why are we fighting again? When did it all start? Why does it keep going on for so many years with no light at the end of the tunnel? And that's a human, very basic human need, especially in times of stress. And what we have discovered, my colleagues and I, in researches that have been conducted in context of intractable conflicts for many years, is that these societies that are involved in such conflict develop shared collective narrative. They develop a narrative that explains why exactly those questions that I raised before. Why these conflicts have started. Why are they going on for so long? Who is the one to blame for the continuation of the conflict and the inability to find a peaceful resolution for that? So we are talking about a narrative which is very important and functional for the societies that are involved. Why is it functional? Because it serves exactly those basic needs to understand together why are we in it for so long. It also answers the question of who is the one to blame for the conflict to continue and how do we as a group look like inside this conflict. This narrative includes functional societal beliefs that relate to both how do we perceive our own group, how do we perceive our enemy, and how do we perceive the nature of the conflict. Of course, the other side is presented very negatively, and you can see here the enormous level of mistrust between Palestinian and Israeli Jews, almost the same, once again, from our joint poll from December 2022. 86% of Israeli Jews and Palestinians said that the other group cannot be trusted. Other examples is the sense of victimization. Each group perceives themselves as the ultimate victim, both in the conflict and compared to other people that suffered from persecution and injustice. Once again, 84% among Israeli Jews, and it's exactly the same among Palestinians, perceive their victimization as the ultimate victimization, which gives them, if you look on the left side, gives them a moral right to do anything in order to protect themselves and to survive, right? So if it gives me the moral right to do that, I'm allowed to do really extreme things, and I feel that they are legitimate. An important thing to say about this shared collective narrative, it's not something they're out, in the air or specifically in people's minds. It is something that exists very deeply within society. How and why? These societal beliefs are institutionalized, meaning they are transferred through the main socialization agents of the country, through the education system, through speeches of leaders, through the media, through films, theater plays, and so on. All of them express the same narrative, therefore institutionalizing this narrative and making it hegemonic and shared among a large majority within society members. These narratives are becoming deeply entrenched and frozen, and people stick to them. it's very difficult to move people away from these narratives, from these set of beliefs. What are the end results of that? So I told you that one end result of that is that people in conflicts, you could see the two-state solution, for example, as one example of a potential peaceful resolution of the conflict being dropping down dramatically. It creates very low willingness to participate in a workshop that brings both sides together, or very low willingness to promote actively good relations between Israeli Jews and Palestinians. You can see here the data from our latest poll. I'd like to leave also some time for a Q&A. So I will be telling you about maybe one of my studies. I'll be talking with you about study 3 here that gives maybe some hope of how can you overcome all of these very difficult barriers to peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Other studies, I'll be glad to tell you about them. If you come and join our program, then you'll hear about such studies and many more, but also because we don't have much time. So I'll jump to the third study, okay? Our third study has been trying to see whether we can create an intervention, psychological intervention, that can that will be able to create more willingness to open up for new ideas for peaceful resolution of the conflict. How did we do that? We based our idea about the psychological notion, which is taken from clinical psychology. You know, okay, when you go to a therapist and you talk with her or with him about your life, one of the models which are presented by clinical psychology is the process of acceptance and change, meaning in order for people to be willing to be more flexible about their attitudes, about their activities in life, first you have to give them a sense that they are accepted. What does that mean? It means that you are giving people a sense that their current set of beliefs is understood and legitimate, right? So you can understand why in your life circumstances, you're using this set of beliefs, why you're using this set of ideas, and you're making that legitimate, okay? It's natural, it's a human thing in these circumstances to act in such ways and to hold such set of beliefs. After you let the other person you give them a sense of acceptance, you will be able to indicate for them the dysfunctionality and cost of keeping the current set of beliefs, okay? To show them the cost that they're paying for this and to indicate that these are not functional for their daily life. That's, according to this theory, is the key in order to create flexibility and willingness of people to unfreeze their current set of beliefs and to be open for new ideas about alternative ways on how to approach their life. So all of that is very nice within the realm of the individual and clinical psychology. How can you use such a thing when you're talking about such a difficult social political conflict? So we have tried to narrow that down to very short, and together with a person who comes from the commercial world, we have created with him very short videos that act or try to show and express these principles of acceptance change. I'll show you such a video. It's a very short 40 seconds video. And after that, I'll talk to you about what does that video intends to do. Oh, sorry, I'll stop and then I'll start sharing again with the video option on. Here it is.
זה טבעי להאמין בצדקת הדרך, ואפילו הכרחי. כל עם שמעורב בסכסוך נאחז בצדקת דרכו. אפשר אחרת? אפשר אחרת. ב-1998 הסתיים הסכסוך בצפון אירלנד בחתימת הסכם בלפאסט בין הקתולים לפרוטסטנטים. חפשו בפייסבוק איך מסתיימים סכסוכים.
Okay, so what have we been trying to do when we presented these videos? Okay. Sorry, for some reason when I'm sharing the screen, I can't see you anymore. 1 second. Yeah, okay, now it's good. So what have we been trying to do with these videos? We've been trying to show those participants in our study that have been watching this video and introducing them with the reasons of why conflict supporting narratives have been evolving. Okay, so they've been evolving because of the experiences of people in the conflict and because it meets their psychological needs. We don't only do that, we also present that this set of conflict supporting narratives are prevalent and they are normal. They don't only exist in Israel, they also existed within Northern Ireland. Okay? But at the same time, we try to explain that this narrative, this set of beliefs, are fueling the continuation of the conflict and contributing to the immense cost paid. And lastly, we suggest the possibility of changing that with a peace-supporting narratives based on the experiences of other conflicts which have been peacefully resolved. Now, think for a moment about that, okay? We've been using an intervention that includes very short videos, watching about 1.5 minutes. And we've been trying to create openness for people who have been, as I said, been part of the Jewish-Israeli society. They've been born into the conflict and they have experienced that and they have been immersed in this narrative for many years, okay? And it was very interesting for us to see that when we examine these things among an online sample of Jewish Israelis, about 500, and sorry, 1 second. Sorry. So we've been showing those videos for half of our participants, and for the other half, we've been showing just commercials, okay? And we wanted to see whether those people who have been watching those videos were more willing to stop for a second and think more deeply about the information that we have provided them. Whether they will be willing to accept these messages that say that these narratives contribute to the continuation of the conflict, and changing these narratives will allow an opening for conflict resolution, and whether it will create higher willingness to support a negotiation between Israelis and Palestinians. And what we have found out is exactly these things. People who have been watching those kind of videos in
Nimrod, sorry,
yeah.
there's like a blue bar on the right. I'm guessing you're not seeing that.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
So people have been watching our videos, have been more willing to think deeply about the information, to reconsider their attitudes about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They've been more willing to accept the idea that if they change their views about the conflict, so the conflict will be more easily resolved, and they've also been more willing to support negotiation for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. So we hope that that's one way to create small opening for change in societies that are involved in conflicts. The last thing that I wanted just one thing to share with you, I've been also looking at the same intervention using almost the exact videos in the conflict in Cyprus between Greek and Turkish Cypriots. And I'm glad to tell you that from the results, preliminary results that we've seen, we have also very nice results indicating similar trends also among both Greek and Turkish Cypriots. If you'll be interested, so maybe now I think I'll open up for a Q&A. If you'll be interested, I can show you things which are not directly related to what I've been telling you, but some findings from our latest surveys about, for example, what the Jewish Israelis have been thinking about the day after the war. How do they see the future of Gaza Strip? But I'll stop here and I'll open it up for you for a Q&A. You can either raise your hand and ask a question, or you can either write it in the chat if you prefer.
Anyone? You can ask any question. Okay, why don't you present the future of what Israelis think should happen, and if anyone has any questions, you can interrupt.
Yeah, you can write it in the chat box, and I'll be glad to answer any question that you have. How do Jewish Israelis see the future of the Gaza Strip after the war? So once again, I'm going back to data from our Peace Index poll and from the last two polls that we have conducted. We have conducted, as I said, our latest poll just a week ago, and the previous one was conducted in January 2024. So we have provided with our participants with two questions about the future of the Gaza Strip. One is, in your opinion, when we ask them, what is the desired political security arrangement in Gaza after the end of the war? We ask them both from a security standpoint and from a political civilian standpoint. We've offered them with three options they could choose from: whether they support full Israeli control, full security Israeli control, or full political civilian Israeli control; whether they prefer control of international and regional forces, or they prefer the control of the Palestinian Authority. And what you can see here is a big difference between how Jewish Israelis see the future of Gaza Strip from a security standpoint and from a political civilian standpoint. You can see here then that in January 2024, there was a big majority among Jewish Israelis who were supportive of full security, Israeli security control over the Gaza Strip, almost 60%, 59%. That has dropped a little bit towards 45%. And you can see that the biggest rise has been in the preference of control of international and regional forces from 27% to 37%. When we ask about political civilian standpoint, you can see here that Jewish Israelis are more reluctant for Israel to control the Gaza Strip as it has been prior to the Oslo Accords, and that gains only third of our respondent support in January 2024, and that has even dropped lower to 28%, while you can see here that there is I would say the most preferable option is the one of the control of international and regional forces. From the political civilian standpoint, it stays about the same 45%, while there is a slight increase in the support of the Palestinian Authority control over the Gaza Strip. But overall, you can see here that there are very low support rates for transferring the control over Gaza Strip, whether from a security standpoint or from a political civilian standpoint, to the Palestinian Authority. And you can see here, I think it reflects very well the lack of trust that Jewish Israelis have in the Palestinian Authority. So that's the one thing I wanted to add about how Jewish Israelis perceive the future of Gaza Strip after the end of the war. Okay, so I have your one question. Um, it says, we've been told that Israeli diplomacy efforts respond more to domestic needs than public needs, causing certainly a gap in understanding the conflict for audiences overseas. How do you see the message you just presenting bridging the conversation? Let's say, for instance, in the academic setting now, and now that encampments have been engulfed campuses in the US. I'm not sure I completely understand that question. The gap in understanding the conflict between the way that Israeli diplomacy, so that it relates mostly to domestic, meaning to the Jewish Israeli public more? I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Can you
So
go ahead.
So the message you presented seems to be something that was tailored for Israel and Israeli audiences. And I was wondering if that could also be presented, to break through the conversation, which seems that everyone is listening to their own messages and we're at very heightened tensions times. So I was wondering, have you tried that messaging that you just presented in the video with audiences that are international? You were speaking about Ireland, for instance. I was wondering if that's something that can be used in campuses for academics that are willing to offer solutions and, break through from this statu quo of just bashing and trashing Israel and Jewish people.
It's an interesting question. I think that as you're saying, first of all, what I've presented here, our study and this short video, is definitely not a diplomatic effort. Okay, it's not in any way intended for outside audiences. It's intended for the society which is involved in the conflict, to try to create attitude change, to try to create more openness among people who are involved in the conflict. So first of all, it's important for me to say that, and to say that, for example, when we looked at that in Cyprus, we looked at both sides. I hope that maybe in the future we'll also be able to look at how do Palestinians react to these messages. Whether these messages will work for outside audiences, I have a serious doubt about that. I think that people who are outside the conflict, it's very difficult for them to see the complexity of living within such a context. It's very difficult for them to understand that support for violent actions against the other side does not express the barbaric nature of society, but they reflect the basic need that people that are part of such conflict to feel that they have to protect themselves, since they are the ultimate and exclusive victim of the conflict. So I think these complexities can be explained, and this is what I've been trying to do, and I've been presenting the first things that I presented to you about the characteristic of the conflict and about its social implications and the narratives that are developed. These are the things that I'm also presenting to outside audiences in order to try to explain for them the complexity of the situation, one thing. And second thing, if they would like to approach either sides in the conflict, I think they will have a much better position to talk with either an Israeli or a Palestinian if they understand where do they come from. What's the characteristic of the conflict they've been experiencing for generations? How does it influence their societies? And what are the narratives that they are born into, that they're told by their parents, by the education system, by the whole social institutions around them?
Thank you.
Can I be heard?
Yes, absolutely, Tom. We can hear you.
Yeah. My name is Tom. I'm from Ireland. You mentioned Ireland. I lived through the Troubles here in Ireland. I'm interested to see how similar do you think the Troubles in Ireland are represented in the Troubles in the Jewish-Palestinian war that's happening at the moment? Because a lot of people mention Northern Ireland and the peace talks, but the route to peace might not be the same in Israel as it was in Ireland and Northern Ireland?
Yes, thank you, Tom, for this question. I've been doing my research about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the Northern Irish conflict for many years. I believe there are a lot of similarities, not to say that they're identical, but I believe that the characteristics of the conflicts of these conflicts as intractable conflicts are quite evident. And the narratives that have been developed in those societies are also quite similar in their themes, not in their content. Of course, the way the goals for Catholics or for Protestants in Northern Ireland are completely different from those of Israelis and Palestinians. But the sense that our goals are completely justified and the goals of the other party are completely illegitimate, the theme is very similar across those two conflicts. Now, this is the basis for a comparison between the two conflicts. It doesn't mean that they're exactly the same. From what I've learned about the conflict in Northern Ireland, the option, for example, of creating two states in Northern Ireland have never been on the table, right? The two societies are completely mixed within each other, and that has never been an option. And the resolution of the conflict, of course, have been at the end based on the idea of shared governance. This option in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at the moment receives very, very low support rates. The idea, for example, of one democratic state for Jews and for Palestinians, it receives very low support rates both among Jews and among Palestinians. So the idea that the conflicts resemble each other in their characteristics and in the experiences that the societies are going through does not mean that the resolution of these conflicts are identical, of course. But the opening of people to the idea that the conflict can be resolved was an important first step in both of these contexts for societies to be willing to accept the idea of change, that change is possible.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Don't be shy.
So if you do have any other questions, you're very welcome about the content of this lecture or about the academic content of our program. You're very welcome to write to me. I'll put my email on the chat box. That's my email. You're very welcome to write to me. And if you have any further questions about registration to our program and further details about our program, of course, you're very welcome to write to Corey. Thank you all for attending this meeting, and we'll be very glad to see you next year here at Tel Aviv University.
Thank you very much.
Everyone. Thanks, Nimrod.
Bye-bye.